So there's going to be the spectrum, and you want to be kind of in the middle, because you want to have those skills that that one of them spectrums has, such as like being like really confident and a good leader. But you also want to be a human, right? Because other spectrum like being soft, and that's part of like what being human is, and understanding other people and working with them, and just knowing how to be social aware. It's gonna take you more places than just being confident and being a leader. Because time to
Right.
time, if you don't have anybody to lead, where are you going? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So like you can be the greatest leader. This is a conversation between friends.
None of what is said here should be taken as legal advice.
We are not experts in any way.
Take what resonates and leave the rest. All right, welcome back, everybody. Another day. We are on episode number 69, I believe. So that's a nice number to be on. And for that, we have an interesting topic. So, on the foundation, what are our thoughts on toxic masculinity? And on the finance, we just have some news updates because a lot of interesting stuff has happened within the last 24 hours. So we'll get to that. All right, let us begin. What do you got?
Right. And just before we begin, we are transitioning into a different format and different quality as well of the times that we upload, just a heads up. But without that, let's get it started. So my thoughts on toxic masculinity. I feel like this is something that has
Oh,
been.
wait. But before we even start,
Go ahead.
do you think it's a thing?
Yeah, definitely there is.
There's
Definitely
such
there
a
is.
thing as toxic masculinity? All right. So what does that look like to you?
Mm, like there's a term I feel like in our culture, well, my culture, that we call it machismo or machista.
Like Hispanic culture?
Yeah. So I feel like
Okay.
toxic masculinity kind of looks like how our ancestors used to see women or treat women in a way. Like, men do this and do that, whereas women, they have to kind of like serve men or like be, in their life to do that. To
Right.
like, rather than being a compliment, they were just there. So they were more like macho. They got home. They just
The
provide the
same
money.
way, like, they explain it like women used to be property, right? So
Exactly. There you go. That's true.
they were treated as such.
Exactly. There was not such a thing like what it looks like now. But what I think about it, um, I feel like just overall society has put us in that situation, but slowly we have been evolving in a way that we don't see it less. And I see that this comes down to the way that you were raised as a man, as a child, for a boy. So if you grew up with a mom who kind of taught you some morals in how to treat women, in the same way, that the way that I think about it is that, am I treating the woman that I'm talking to or am I dating the way that I want another man to treat my sisters? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it all comes down to that. Like, it just, if you grew up in an environment just um, with a lot of masculinity, like I just man, maybe you just grew up with your dad, then there's going to be some imbalance that you just talk shit about women and just see them like less than you. And like you mentioned, like back in the days, women, they were more seen as a property rather than a partner. So it kind of builds that tension.
Right.
What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, there's definitely such a thing. I would think is something that's like an over exaggeration of what masculinity not necessarily should be, but like what it can be, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, like exactly what you just mentioned, right? Like a man that's macho, that's overly macho, that essentially is for the for like the most basic understand or just like the most basic premise is just somebody that's overcompensating, right? Usually that's what you're going to find with somebody that's overly macho. They're overcompensating because they're essentially they don't feel comfortable with who they are or like they're standing in life, so they outwardly project over amount of strength and dominance just to make people feel less, right? Now that can be with women. That tends to be how the topic is talked about, right? But it could also be with other guys. It's not necessarily that it's just revolved around women, right? It could also be a guy in a workplace, right? Or a guy in a sports team, or a guy in a club or whatever. It's that kind of guy that they make the situation in such a way where they have to be the most dominating force just to prove that, they're the most alpha. When in reality, like, the perception there, if you're somebody, well, I mean, not necessarily that isn't intelligent, but somebody that, kind of sees things and has awareness, is that this dude is overcompensating because he's afraid of something. Maybe if I outwit him, right? If, like, we're going back and forth having a conversation or something, and I say something that's a little bit more clever than him, boom, that triggers something. And now he has to overcompensate by acting really macho and being like, oh, what, you think you're better than me or something? Right? So to that end, I would say that, toxic masculinity can exist in that form. But yeah, I mean, like, there's something to be said, though, because sometimes this can be taken to the extreme. Because in the same way that, a macho man isn't necessarily, like, all those aspects aren't great in the way that we talk about it, some of those characteristics are positive to have, right? Because maybe somebody that's macho can be confident sometimes. Or somebody that exudes a lot of masculinity has a tendency of being in leadership positions. You usually see that. Maybe you can say that's a masculine trait, or maybe not. But, being a leader has a tendency of having some sense of masculinity to it. So, there has to be a balance that has to be struck here, where it's not all bad, which doesn't mean that it's all good either. It's, where's the balance in it?
Right. I would say it's more like a balance, because, yeah, there's some qualities associated with, like, masculinity, right? And being, having a good sense of who you are in being a man, pretty much, is something that kind of is part of our nature, So there are some traits associated with it, like you mentioned. Taking leadership positions is one of them, or just being confident, or just even protecting the loved ones that you're around. But there's something that we can talk about how, it's kind of like what do you call it? It's a stream with both ends, with two ends. One, at one end, you have feminine traits. You're not really that masculine, or you're just normal. Well, not normal, but, like, you're just very soft.
Yeah, feminine and masculine, or femininity and masculinity.
So you're more like, not even feminine. I would say, like, you're more soft, in, like, the soft kind of end of the spectrum. And then we have somebody who is really like very, very masculine, like, traits, very, really good, or a lot of masculinity traits. So there's going to be the spectrum, and you want to be kind of in the middle, because you want to have those skills that that one of them the spectrums has, such as, like, being, like, really confident and a good leader. But you also want to be a human, right? Because other spectrum, like being soft, and that's part of, like, what being human is, and understanding other people and working with them, and just knowing how to be social aware. It's gonna take you more places than just being confident and being a leader, because time to time, if you don't have anybody to lead, where are you going? You know what I mean? So, like, you can be the greatest leader out there, but if you don't have, like, personality or persona, you cannot lead anyone. So it's definitely has to be a balance there. But most of the time, I feel like being toxic masculinity is mostly seen when it comes to, like, women, because once again, you are overcompensating, and you want to be, or you want to, what's it called, you want to
controlling,
more, other than controlling, you want to impress the girl, or you want to, like, play around with it, playing around with her as well. So it's just like, you were compensating maybe something that maybe you were rejected so many times that, yeah, you now have the feeling to reject the girls, or just play around with them. And when you mention about, like, being in a room, or, like, let's say, like a room full of men, and if you're toxic, like, you have those traits, it's usually like you overcompensated it with like the physique, like you have to be like, like big and strong and whatever. But if somebody tries to be more clever than you and is more smart than you, and they just like trying to play with your feelings, you're going to overreact. In one instance that you're going to see this more often is that they're gonna go with the physical attack. You know what I mean? Most
Right.
likely they're going to attack you like physically, like push you or punch you, like straight up, if you get them mad, because you just hurt their feelings, and their feelings are so fragile that
They
it's
have to
just
get physical, right?
burst. Yeah. So how can you detect one?
How can you detect a guy that's overly masculine?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, obviously, just right up off the bat, it's somebody that's going to be the two things there: dominant, like overly domineering, and controlling.
Mm-hmm.
You try to have a conversation, or like, yeah, you try to have a conversation, and he doesn't even let you talk, right?
Right.
Or like if you're in a room, like he needs to be the center of attention.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Not like if anybody else is talking, that's not something that they like. Um, Again, they're sometimes like these people gravitate towards leadership positions, and that's usually end up being one of the problems, right? So you can kind of say maybe you'll see one of these type of people in leadership positions often,
Mm-hmm.
because being a leader isn't easy, and there's only two reasons why you want to be a leader: for the power, or because you've been put in that position because you're worthy of it by
Mm-hmm.
those people around you that have judged you, that have deemed you worthy, right? So, sort of speaking like a president, right? You've been voted in. Like people see that you are some sort of quality and caliber, so they want you to lead them, as opposed to the guy that kind of just work, well, not necessarily work, but he wants to be in that position because he likes the power.
Right.
Um, so I would say that that's not even a guy, because this could be a woman as well. But
Mm-hmm.
obviously, we're talking about toxic masculinity. Maybe that'll go to toxic femininity. We do that in a future topic. But in terms of masculinity, that's usually what you're going to see in guys. Um,
Well, when you mention about leadership, I feel like there's something that we can say about like natural born leaders, because there's like people who like literally they're just drawn to become a leader. Like even if they don't want to be a leader, they're just drawn to fitting into the box. And I feel like that's one of those challenges that one faces, because like you mentioned, being a leader, it is hard just to guide, because you have to respect the boundaries, but at the same time you gotta learn to move forward as a team. And this is the time that you start thinking more aside of just the individualism, like being individual, but more as a collectivism, and have the mindset. So I wouldn't really associate toxic masculinity with leadership. I don't think that's the case most often. I feel like toxic
not most stuff.
masculinity.
I say it sometimes, because
Mm,
usually people that have that kind of negative masculinity have a tendency of liking power.
mm. Because I would say like more like toxic masculinity, I would be like if somebody's an asshole or just disrespectful, just not just tries to like when you're talking and they just cut you off like before you even finish
Yeah,
your sentence.
dominating the conversation.
So that I would say like it's somebody who you know shows some traits to be having some toxic masculinity in it, but that might not be the case. Other cannot really
No, I mean
judge.
sometimes people, you can get the wrong interpretation of people initially, and then later on you talk to them like, hey, they're actually pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we're just talking about like up front, like the first couple of things that you can notice about somebody if they're of like that nature of having a toxic personality. Because this goes towards more of having a toxic personality as opposed to just being masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's where I would go with that.
Right, and another thing too, like if maybe you show those, not you, but like the person who's listening to this shows those traits or feel like maybe you might be categorized as a toxic masculinity or having those traits, uh, that's changeable. Once again, this is just a label. In like any label, you can change it. It will be up to you, and this all kind of comes down to like the personality that you wanna kind of like focus on. And at the end of the day, I feel like that personality or our personality grows on the aspects of the life that we kind of want to grow on. For example, if you think about like a plant, let's say you have like different buckets of plants, right? Like one shows that you're charismatic, another one that you are really, really angry, another one that you're really depressed and whatever. You choose which plant you want to water it, and depending on that, that plant eventually is going to grow. So think about like that in your personality. So those traits that you really want to enhance, or those traits that you really want to like put forward, or just like kind of associate more with your personality. You just want to focus on the activities or the things that you can do to enhance those traits in your personality. I don't know if that's a little bit clear, but I feel like personality changes with time and with experience, and also the people that you talk to and the people that you surround with.
For sure. Yeah, personalities don't have to be static. They can always change. It's really just up to you. Usually personalities will change if you're forced to change, right? Like if you're in an environment where hypothetically, let's say you used to be in a leadership position and you get fired, well, now you have to change your personality because you're no longer a leader. And that's just a basic example. But things like that can happen all the time where you're forced to change your personality. So yeah, man. Find the balance. That's where you're gonna find the best results here. Because there's good qualities of being a masculine man or person, but you do need to have things like compassion and being able to reason and resonate with people and not just be all hard ass the whole time.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, you can be, and that's like we've seen that with cultures in the past, like the Spartans, right, where their whole thing was just purely dominance, masculinity, and it was all about war and fighting. And those are cultures that in hindsight we look at it as not necessarily like the standard that we want to base our society around, but it's something to be admired because these people or these men, they did a lot, and there weren't that many of them because the trials and tribulations that they put these people through. Like, dude, they put their kids, or like the kids they put through combat, or rather through what's called trials. Like they put them out in the jungle to survive at like 9 years old against wild animals like tigers or anything like that. Anything in the wild, they just sent them out by themselves with a knife, and they just had to survive for like a week or so, alone, with no help. Right.
Right.
There's something to be admired about having the ability to survive.
I think I remember we talked about this on the podcast like way back, like when we started beginning almost this podcast. We talk about being dominant, like which one is more important, being dominant or prestige, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So wait, it's not dominant. And yeah, it is prestige, if I'm not mistaken. So which one is more like, which one would you prefer over, the prestige brings you, there's some level of dominance that you will have, but there's some level of honor as a man that you will contribute. And we can look back, as you mentioned, like historically, like those type of men who were forced to kind of become a man at early ages. Or like if we go back to like medieval times, like a knight, he had to like sacrifice his life to protect the lords or the of his family or whatever, right? And there's some honor to the name, because back then it was all about the honor that you can bring to your family. If we go to like Asia, the samurais, they had to either die on the battle, but they cannot like run away. So there's something that we can talk about later on, maybe about honor and how important that is nowadays, because as we shift in like from those times to now, and we have seen some change on it. Like a lot of the times people don't respect a man anymore. So there's something.
I mean, that's why toxic masculinity is a thing. Maybe you literally just exude some positive aspects of masculinity, but it can be perceived as toxic, and then boom, you labeled as a man that has toxic masculinity. So yeah, there's something there that we're missing nowadays, where we're not seeing a good balance, and everything is shifting towards one end of the spectrum. But like with everything, it's a pendulum. It always swings back in the opposite direction at some point. But this
Absolutely.
is the times that we live in now.
Yeah, but yeah, we can definitely talk about that in another day. But let's move on to the last topic of the day before this gets too long.
Mhm.
What do you got for me? Some news updates. I know you've been following GameStop very closely.
Yeah, so some interesting stuff has been happening. So the technical term of what ended up happening with GameStop, and just to give you a brief synopsis, so the stock has gone from, it was basically hovering before, I think like October, it was hovering somewhere around $5 to $10 before October 2020. Then after that, it kind of got pushed up to about 20. It came back down to like 13, 15. Usually that was the range, and pumped up back up to 20. Now it's been getting out in such a way where the price action has pushed all the way up to 200 and 250, I think, was as high as today, as we talk about it on, what is it, January the 26th, 2021. So what happened was this term called the short squeeze, where I'll just read you out the definition here, is a rapid increase in the price of a stock owing primarily to technical factors in the market rather than underlying fundamentals. A short squeeze can occur when there's a lack of supply and an excess demand for the stock due to short sellers covering their positions. So there's a lot of technical stuff there, and maybe Michael can help brief that out a little bit better. But essentially, people that short a stock are people that are going against the stock, right? And these people have bought an overabundance of these positions where you're trying to go against the stock. Now, what ended up happening was the fact that these people on Reddit, subreddit called Wall Street Bets, kind of got wind of this. And, well, before I even go any further, I just say that these people that have been shorting GameStop for so long, for like the last 2 years, give or take, have profited over almost 150% off the stock, just by pushing it down further and further over time. So I guess what you could say is that these people from Wall Street Bets became like a Robin Hood and decided that they were going to, well, get these people out of these shorting positions by drastically pushing up the prices so that they have to cover those positions by buying more of the stock as opposed to going against the stock. So as the prices kept rising, those short positions kept getting smaller and smaller. And as that kept getting smaller and smaller, those people that were in the shorting decided that they had to buy in order to make back whatever profits that they lost. So then that just kept technically driving the prices higher and higher and higher until we're at this point where I don't know what's going to happen, but these people on the Wall Street Bets are trying to push this stock to be over $1,000. And now it's sitting at 250. That means they're trying to 4x where it's at now, which technically has 10x. It's been getting traded back in like November of last year. So that's the basic idea of what's happening with GameStop.
Right. So just to clarify, there's no fundamentals behind this investment. So the price that the stock represents right now doesn't really evaluate the company. The company is getting huge wings of but absolutely, but there's nothing that can support this price. So right now, GameStop, give it or take, is sitting on like $20 to $30. That's the price that, as an investor, somebody will pay. But because of like this group, I would say that, right? They're a group of people on Reddit.
Basically,
They're just pushing the price, and once again, the market reacts on how people react, on how people feel about the company. That's why Tesla had a lot of momentum, because there's people who believe in the company and they believe in that there is some fundamentals behind it, no? Right, for the futures 5-10 years from now. But whereas GameStop right now, there's nothing that can hold. Like this bubble can burst any second and it can go back to like being a penny stock. So there's the risk, but like short sellers or people who've been day trading, they definitely got a huge advantage out of it. especially if they were holding the stock at an initial price when it was sitting on like $9, like under $10. But yeah, so
I
it's an
believe
interesting.
I saw in the news that the
Mhm.
people that have been shorting GameStop have lost at least about $90 billion in value.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a risky game, the stock market. If you don't know how to play it, or if some catalyst like this happens, you can lose all your money. You can go
Yes,
bankrupt.
sir.
It's the beauty of it. That's why you have to do your research and not get into these risky games, unless you have the money to waste it, of course. But I don't think that's
I
the
would
case.
say also one other thing. This is technically almost possibly happening with AMC. So be on the lookout for that if you're looking to make some ridiculous gains, or if this thing decides that it's going to drop off a cliff, it could also do that. Let me see. AMC is now sitting at $7.80.
Right. Yes.
So,
I took some position
and
in there, but the thing is about AMC is that they merging with some spec, right? They're merging with some other company or something like
I
that.
don't know if those going to do that. I just know that they have some funding now that can cover them for a while now. They can cover their debts for a
Yeah,
period of time now. So if the movie theater industry can come back to life, they can sustain themselves.
right. Yeah, there was some fundamental behind that. But anyways, communications and real estate both gained over 1% today. And utilities and basic materials both lost more than 1%. Energy dropped 2% since January 5th. Crypto was very quiet. It's been bouncing from 30 and 32K, give it a take. But it's not clear what trend Bitcoin is going to take right now. There's a risky game there as well, but it has the potential to reach even to 120K if Bitcoin were to take the gold place, at least for like an alternative investment, safe internet. GameStop didn't stop. It strangled the shorts. It went up 92% today. We have Airbnb advanced 8%, and SPCE took off with a 16% gain today as well. Cool. And we were mentioning AMD and Microsoft reported earnings after the close. Microsoft popped to all-time highs after hours, which was really good to see that because I hold some Microsoft shares. Anyways, Johnson & Johnson's also released their earnings report today, exceeded Wall Street expectations for Q4, and there are some talks about the CDC about to approve their vaccine. So keep a lookout for that. Maybe there will be a little catalyst for it as well. Now, Pfizer, according to their executive partners, Pfizer and biotech will be able to supply the U.S. with 200 million COVID-19 vaccines by late May. So 2 months earlier than the company original projections. So they're working really hard, seems like. But PepsiCo and Beyond Meat teamed up today to launch the Planet Partnership, tapping into growing consumers' demand for eco-friendly plant-based proteins. So that's a trendy thing that is happening ever since like 2019 or so. Now, Twitter announced its acquisition of the email newsletter startup Review, a move that will help users who want to make money from followers. Cool, interesting. So you can monetize your Twitter account now, well, moving forward, which seems like. Twitter will make Review premium features free for all Twitter users. The platform also plans to lower Review's newsletters fee, giving more back to writers per subscription. The deal will connect influencers and audience more efficiently, since some of the Review's current clients include Vox Media, Chicago Sun-Times, and The Markup. Interesting. And that's pretty much it for today. Earlier today, on January 26, a large part of the eastern U.S. experienced an internet outage. This was due to some internet companies made changes to its network without testing them, and the changes accidentally sent too much traffic through its peering systems. It kind of got overcrowded, overflow, exploded, boom, outreach. All right, that's pretty much it for me on today's news, but keep tuned for the next ones.
Sure. All right.
Yeah. You
Anything
guys
else to add? That's it?
That's it for me.
Well done.
Peace out.
До свидания.
What the is we doing?